when somebody's able to be reflective and you feel like that's such a quality, I think if I interviewed anybody for a leadership position, everybody would say I'm reflective. It's a great cliche term or a great buzzword that you can use in an interview. I'm really reflective, but really seeing that happen and say, okay, it's not easy when things are coming at you and you're trying to go down this road and there's so many distractions, so many challenges in your way. It's not easy to just pause and say, okay, what can I learn from this? And how is this going to make me better?
Welcome to the Unleashing Leaders podcast, where we work with willing leaders to accelerate the changes you seek. We'll learn from the experiences of different leaders facing real challenges and distill practical, purposeful steps to apply in your context. I'm Lee Scott, your curious co-pilot. Together, let's make positive changes for our companies and communities. Welcome back to the Unleashing Leaders podcast. We are super excited to be joined today by Dr. Derek Bubb. He is the current superintendent of the West Ada School District. It is the largest K-12 educational district in the state of Idaho, based here in Boise. It's a great blend of urban and rural students, so dealing with a blended challenge with those types of demographics in a very rapidly growing and very rapidly changing valley here. Derek, it is great to have you on the show.
Oh, it's so great to be here, Lee. I appreciate the opportunity.
Love it. Love it. You got such a great story that we want to get into, but I want to tee up first our topic for our listeners to make sure that they're going to want to stick around for this. Today, we are looking at the dark side of leadership. And by that, I don't mean that Derek is a Sith Lord, Dr. Evil. No, what we're talking about here is when good leaders get in really, really challenging situations, right? And it's not necessarily like, oh, oops, somebody made a mistake, and then you're learning from it. It's beyond that realm of being in the learning and growing zone, but really you're in a severely challenged, maybe for an extended period of time, like that crucible, where you get some things that maybe you don't deserve, and it gets hard at times to sustain those leadership behaviors in the face of that adversity. And then for you especially, when you're a leader of an organization where you've got other leaders that are going through those types of challenges, how do you be aware of it? How do you be compassionate about it? How do you help them through it? And then what does the rebuilding of trust and faith look like on the other side so it doesn't permanently dampen their lives? I mean, leadership's way harder than it's usually cracked up to be. It's not all glory, right? So we want to look at that side of leadership today, and which is going to be weird because you're such an optimistic guy. I know I'm an optimistic guy, but I think, for many of us out there, we face those moments and we think, man, am I just being weak? Am I just not being strong enough? And it's like, look, these are challenging times for different reasons at different, parts in our career. Does that sound like a fun topic to dive in for you today?
Yeah, you know what? I'm excited about it. You have to be battle tested a little bit to lead in education in the state of Idaho. That's an exciting part, and I feel that's really where you feel like you can make an impact, is be able to lead that change. But to say that there's never a day in which you don't look in the mirror and say, "Whew, man, I've been in the arena today."
Yeah, man in the arena comes to mind for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. And for those of you listening, thanks again for getting us across. We're well over 40,000 downloads now. Please, listen to the show, give us a rating. We've got over 500 5-star ratings on Spotify. Check us out on social media, stay connected with this growing community. And if you're one of those 10 leaders out there that are listening, where you're like, I'm a perfect leader, I'm in ideal market conditions. My team members just, applaud and praise me from the rooftops. And I have no challenging stakeholders. Well, of those 10, 8 of you are in complete denial and 2 of you just haven't been around the block enough times. So, skip this episode, but save it to come back, when you're ready. For the rest of us, this is like, yes, this is where I'm at. And it's not just education, but I think, it has unique challenges that I think we all can learn from. So with that, Derek, tell us first a little bit about your origin story. What was your first career? How did you get into education, and how did you end up in the role you are today?
Yeah. So I'm really a great lesson on what not to do, I guess I would say. I grew up in a family of educators, kind of made that personal commitment and probably a little bit of a outward commitment to my family that I'm never going to get into education. Clearly that didn't work out for me.
You can run, but you can't hide. There you go.
Right. My first career, I was worked in fraud investigations for an insurance company. Did a lot of that work. I actually graduated with a degree in criminal justice and mathematics, and so that was kind of my focus. I felt like I'm going to go work for the FBI. Kind of got down that road and met a beautiful lady who said, "Hey, I'd love to marry you, but I don't want to necessarily have a husband in law enforcement." So is there something else you might be interested in? And
Yeah, what's the most obvious transferable related industry, and I'm already seeing your superpower here. You said insurance, fraud, and auditing. I mean, three words that are hard by themselves. You put all of them together, of course you're a glutton for punishment.
and here we go. Let's go into education instead. So we start getting down this road, and I thought, I might want to get into education. I want to make a difference in this world, and there's a lot of different avenues to be able to do that. I think everybody finds their different philanthropy or different place that they can make their impact. So I went down this road. I went and saw a friend of mine who's a superintendent in a school district. And I said, "Hey, I have a degree in math. Is there any shot that I could become a teacher?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll hire you tomorrow."
And
I said,
a male math teacher, right? They would just grab you in a heartbeat.
Yeah. And you know what? I loved my time in the classroom. It was amazing. I could control what happened within my four walls. And I said, I'm always going to stay in the classroom. That's my spot. That's my niche, if you will. And somebody came to me and said, "Hey, Derek, what do you think about becoming a school leader?" And I said, "Well, that's crazy. I would never do that." Again, lesson in life, don't say never. I said I would never do that. And pretty soon I became an assistant principal, and I had another leader that came to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about becoming a principal?" And so as I reflect on my leadership journey, I can tell you that the one thing that always stands out to me is I've been fortunate enough to have people around me that believed in me probably more than I believed in myself at that given time. I always felt like, hey, you know what? I love to control what I can control, and everything within that little locus works. But I think there's this opportunity in which people look at you and say, "Hey, we believe in you. We think you can do some great things, and your impact could be even greater." I'll never forget, one of my mentors looked at me and said, "Right now you get to impact 30 kids per period, 6 periods a day. So you get 180 kids. You may have the opportunity to impact 2,000 kids." And I thought 2,000 kids at a high school, that's pretty tremendous. Wow. What if I could do that? I now get an opportunity to just be a part of 40,000 kids' lives, which is just that bigger ripple in the water. And I think that's the part that drives me every single day. And if we talk about that dark side of leadership, I think the thing that keeps me swimming across the lake is the fact that there are these bright sides, and you're able to make some positive impacts on the lives of kids and hopefully the community.
Yeah, it definitely calls to you, and you can see that in your interactions and the way you show up. And I love that definition of leadership you already started with. It's like somebody who believes in you more than you even believe in yourself. And you're right, because, in that classroom, or maybe for somebody it's in the shop, or maybe it's their, patrol route, talk about law enforcement, what it's their, district or their location, you can become the master of that domain. And it's very fulfilling, right? Because you've got certainty, you have an impact, right? Like you said, you have that locus of control. And yes, there's challenging times, and yes, there's adversity with that. But there's that invitation, to be able to say, hey, I can scale up that impact. And when leaders do that for that reason, right? Not for the glory, but for the reasons that you talked about, that impact, then when the inevitable setbacks and blowbacks and challenges happen, they don't take you out of the game. But it is not still for the faint of heart. So, that's really brilliant. And that's a career that spanned now. I don't mean to age you too much there, brother. You're pretty young looking. But over the last 20-ish years, in that progression. And I love the great predictor of what's next for Derek is, the moment he says never.
Yeah. I try to avoid that word from now on. So
excellent. So you're in this role now, you still have this beautiful wife, that is, your love and your inspiration. And so, she's got all this free time with you, that, she didn't want to lose, that, she's now gotten to enjoy along the way. Right.
She says hello to me on Tuesdays every week, and then says hello to me again the next Tuesday. So So, but you know what? Her passion is my passion. And I think what drives her, and, I'm super lucky to have somebody in my life that is willing to walk alongside me through that journey. And I always ask her before I apply for any position, I always ask her what her thoughts are. And her response is always, I don't really know why you're asking me this. I'm going to go on this journey with you no matter what. So, sometimes we fall upon that lucky star, and she's that for me.
Absolutely. That is great. Yes, my wife's a veterinarian, and so whenever she comes to ask me about the next animal I get, I say the same thing. It's like, why are you asking me? We know we're going to get this animal, so like, just let's do it. So yeah, it cuts both ways. Well, let's turn from this, positive, fulfilling, aspirational journey that you've been on, which was of course free of any defects or blemishes or setbacks. But for other people along the way that you observed. Let's take a closer look at what we're calling the dark side of leadership. Those moments and times where, I'm thinking for some of our listeners, maybe it's a fractured, board or an adversarial hostile board that they're working with, either in corporate or in government. A legislature is a board, right? I mean, it's still the same thing. Maybe it's a really adversarial stakeholder relationship, or it's just negative press that, ain't true, but, that's never stopped press from going out. Those are all the types of things that are out there, or even internally, right? Just, really difficult internal organizational changes. For you, Derek, what have been some of those moments? And we can change the names to protect the guilty. But what were some of those moments for you where either you were part of it or you were going through it with others along the journey?
Yeah, what always comes to mind when we start talking about this is the surprises, right? We know there's always these predictors where you can say, hey, you know what, this is going to be a tough conversation. Let's just say we're closing a school, or we're changing boundaries. Like, we know that that's hard on people. That's hard on families. You can predict that. You can see that. You can navigate that. And there's also probably light at the end of that tunnel.
Yeah.
I think the hard ones as a leader are always around those moments that you don't expect. They're the surprises. I had a mentor of mine who said it's never the big things, because you can always predict those big things. It's always the little things. It's the little things that get you and really get you down. And you think, oh man, how do we end up where we're at? Because we didn't see those coming. And so what comes to mind for me is we had a couple years ago, we went, no secret, we went to full day kindergarten in the state of Idaho. We had the option, the legislature funded education to a level in which we were able to we weren't forced to go to full day kindergarten, but we were able to go to full day kindergarten. Well, as an educator, I sat back and I thought, wow, what a great opportunity. This is going to be amazing. Everybody's, I was ready. I was drawing the statue that they're going to build of me. This is going to be amazing. And quickly I realized that, thankfully we have a lot of parents in our community that want to spend time with their kids half that day. And, now you've got a 5-year-old that we're putting in school for a full day. And so there was actually some people that were pushing back on that. And so, as you roll this out with just an option for full day, everybody's going to go to full day kindergarten, and you think everybody's going to pat you on the back. You quickly get surprised by what is probably some really legitimate critical feedback about that. And so, as you go through that, I think it's important to, number one, always look at the little things. But then number two, that one comes to my mind, because what I started to have to sit back and do is listen to other people's perspectives. And
there you go.
It is when you have it set that you're going to do this great thing, whatever that might be. And that's not just education. That could be in anything. And you have your mindset on the goal. When I have my mindset on that goal, it's really hard to sit back and say, okay, what is the thread of truth in whatever feedback people are giving me? It's easy to discount things and say, hey, this isn't true, or you don't understand, or justify my position. I think it's important for us as leaders to sit back and say, I've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Let me hear you out. Let me get some feedback. And then maybe I'm going to learn something from you. As much as, education, we're famous for knowing a lot about education. We love acronyms and all of those things. But guess what? Our parents teach us so much. Our stakeholders teach us so much. And so when you take that opportunity to learn from them and learn about their given situation, man, I wish I could have spent more time with my parents when I was 5 years old. I have a dad that's no longer with us, and I have a mom that lives in Arizona, and I give anything to spend just a couple more minutes with them at any given time. And 5-year-old Derek would have loved that. And as I started to hear that perspective, and I even considered, how would somebody feel if they had 5-year-old Derek in class?
Oh gosh,
And
yeah,
you're
like,
yeah,
wait a minute.
education would be different today, that's for sure. And so,
That experiment wouldn't have lasted very long if you and I had
no
happened to been in the same
question,
pond.
no question. So I think starting, I always like to start with listening.
Yeah.
There's always this passion. I'll give you another piece of advice that I got from a leader that, especially when it comes to kids. I came from an area where there are a lot of wildfires, and there's always somebody during those wildfires, and we're kind of fresh off the California wildfires that we just saw. And there's always somebody who stays at their house, and they spray down their house, and they're like, I'm not leaving my house. It's the most valuable thing. Somebody said to me, well, listen, if they're willing to do that for their house, what are they willing to do for their child?
Shit. Yeah.
And
yeah.
listen, that completely changed my perspective. I don't judge that guy that's spraying down his house and saying, I value my house that much. I shouldn't judge that parent that's willing to advocate. In fact, I wish we had more parents that would advocate for their kids.
Passionate. Yeah.
And then we just have this responsibility to obviously listen and then adapt. And I think you can get a lot of stakeholders on board when you start with listening and then adjusting your plans from there.
Derek, a lot of great nuggets in there. The first one you started with is the distinction that it's usually the small stuff, right, that ends up kind of gumming up the works. It reminds me of the quote that, it's not the mountain, but the grain of sand in your shoe. That'll wear you down the fastest. And both because, it's harder to see them. But then you also mentioned this notion that when you get your heart set, and as leaders, right, we're supposed to be visionary. Right. And in fact, we just finished an episode series on the podcast, really defining vision. And the majority of vision is what you're seeing and what you're hearing, less about what you're saying. Right. It's not about the speech. It's about the paying attention. But yeah, you decide that, from a policy perspective or a strategy or a technology, you're like, this is going to be so much better. And it's going to be win, win, win. And then you realize that, whatever assumptions or blind spots that we had in our lived experience, then will crop up to bite us. So then being able to be, ears forward, and in terms of listening to say, I know for a fact, I don't know all the perspectives out there. And especially when you're dealing with a raving fan customer base, such as, parents of young children, to be mindful that, and the broader and bigger it gets, the more like you are to catch those dispersed perspectives. So not being surprised by the surprises, I think, is kind of part of the first step, I think, is what I was hearing you share there. So those are all great great insights. So now you're in it. Okay. You stepped on the rake. Wham. Okay, man, should have saw that coming, but I didn't. All right. Now I'm scrambling. I'm recovering. I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to restore some respect, some trust with that group or whatnot. Now let's take the perspective that you're seeing it happen to a colleague, right? They're in the grip. And they're swimming and they're swirling. Maybe there's some hurt feelings like, man, that wasn't my intention at all. Don't personify this with me. And all the bruises, right, start showing up for that poor leader. When they're in the moment of that crucible or that surprise, what are some things maybe not to do, and what are some things maybe to do to help that colleague out?
Well, let me start with, I like to think of analogies, and leadership is all about experiences. I tell my kids, and I tell those that I work with, I have a lot of wisdom, not because I'm a really smart guy. I have a lot of wisdom because I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And so
there you go.
That has gained me that wisdom.
Instead of whoever dies with the most toys wins, it's whoever dies with the most mistakes wins. Right?
And I've got those. I might be the leader. I don't know if that's a tracker out there, but I guarantee I'd be on the top 10 list. So, I think that what I always like to think about is I have a 16-year-old daughter and I have a 17-year-old daughter, and both are terrible drivers. They're going to be really upset with me for divulging that, but they've been in car accidents, right? When I go
age appropriate, that's when they're supposed to happen then, right? When their bodies are nimble and recover quickly.
Absolutely. When I go and I show up and they've been in a fender bender and nothing's been serious, thankfully. But the last thing they need to hear from me is, how far were you traveling behind? Why did you do this? How fast were you going? What they need from me at that point right there
But let's
is
be honest, that does feel good, right?
it
It's
does. Oh,
so
listen.
tempting.
And my first instinct is that right there. But I know what they need from me is a hug and for me to say, I love you. We're going to get through this. It's a road, it's a speed bump and we're going to get through it.
Yeah.
There is obviously a time and a place to have that constructive conversation about what did we learn from this? But I think the first thing that leaders that are around me and that I get to interact with need to hear is we love you and we're going to get through this.
Yeah. I like this. I'm going to call this distinction, leading with compassion versus condensation, right? And it's like, look, yes, we'll have the corrective, we'll have the discovery, but they're not in the state right now to receive it. So don't even bother sending it. And what they really need when we say encouragement, it literally means to put back in the courage, right? And so they need to have that cup refilled. Great
funny,
analogy.
And you said it earlier, and you're absolutely right. What would make me feel better is condemnation, right? When something, especially where I'm like, oh gosh, we should have known that, it would have made me feel much better to show up to that car accident and say, what were you doing? I told you not to do this. How many times did I say don't speed or, whatever it might be? It's very easy to go to a leader and say, what were you thinking? How did you not think through this way? Clearly, they're going to come to those terms on their own, and there's a time and place for that conversation.
Yeah.
But whatever I say at that given time is for Derek and to help Derek out. It's probably not going to help whoever that leader might be. And so that's an important piece. I also believe that leaders need to make mistakes. I am a product of a lot of great mistakes. And so we need to allow leaders. One of the hardest things is seeing a leader go down a path where it's probably going to create some pushback and they're going to have to navigate this and just letting it go. And I work through this with my board. I work through this with my executive team because it's very easy for Derek to step in and say, watch out, this is going to happen. Or, hey, try to navigate this. But people aren't going to learn. We're not going to build capacity within our organization if Derek's just doing it or any of our really, seasoned leaders are just doing it. You have to let, especially some of your younger leaders, not by age, but younger in experience.
And career.
Career. You have to let them learn a little bit. And that's the hardest thing as a leader, knowing that somebody is walking, somebody that represents you as a district, somebody that represents you as a leader is walking into a trap and you're going to kind of let it go. And there's things, anybody that
non-lethal, non-permanent traps,
100%.
Right? Yeah.
There are things that they know that I think people that work around me know I will not let just fall apart.
Yeah.
But there are also some things that I think it's really healthy for an organization to let slip a little bit. And I think our leaders learn from that, and it only happens once, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're in the arena, if you will. And all of a sudden somebody says, I don't like being in the arena. So next time I'm going to roll something out, I'm going to think through it 10 times. And I'm not going to just give my perspective. I'm going to maybe instead of just thinking what parents want or thinking what stakeholders might want, I'm actually going to go seek them and ask them, hey, what do you think about this? And so I think that's where you start to see leaders grow and improve off their mistakes.
Well, and one of the truths of that kind of engagement is even if you did know, even if you were right with what they wanted to know, it doesn't matter unless they believe that you know. So you have to, ask and have the conversation and have them saying, okay, I see that you understand me, right? It's seeking first to understand and to have them believe that you understand it before you seek to be understood. And that takes some effort. And it takes some patience, and it takes some humility, which is hard. And it doesn't mean you have to agree, but it means you gotta, be able to say, hey, I understand you well enough that I can now show you the empathy for your perspective. And I think the other thing is often, oh goodness gracious, is it my eyes or is it the camera? There we go.
No, there you go. You're in.
So the other dimension, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, is often when we talk about leading, we refer to, overcoming resistance, right? Or managing resistance, or, terms of that language when we talk about change management and the like. And yeah, there might be a degree of that. I think that's true. From my perspective and what you're sharing here, it's more about inviting resistance and making sure you know where it's coming from, seeing what you can learn from it, adapting perhaps even your path or your perspective, or just maybe the way you package it so that, that is now incorporated to the degree that it can be versus, nope, I'm mightier than you. I've got bigger gangsters than you. And so I'm going to overcome and push through in the face of that challenge. Now, again, there might come a point where they go, hey, we respectfully disagree. And these are mutually exclusive. We cannot do both, and resources are limited. And so we're going to do A, not B. Great, but I think there's a good portion of inviting and integrating the resistance versus just trying to overcome it.
That's interesting you say that. And I love that perspective because I think that a good plan overcomes resistance. A great plan invites resistance. And when you start walking through whatever that plan is, and, this is education, I think this is anything. If you start to invite that resistance and say, hey, I think my plan is great, but tell me more about what you think. And that's not just, obviously parents' perspective is really interesting, but I love, we're in education. I can't tell you how many times we make decisions without asking teachers. I'm just going to tell you, teachers have a really good perspective. And so
how well does that go over the 700,000th time, Derek? I mean, at some point it's got to work, right? We just keep doing the same darn thing.
And it's almost always my question. How many teachers were involved in this decision? Oh, that's great. Let's go back and let's invite that resistance. Well, teachers are going to be upset about this. Okay. Well, if it doesn't work for teachers, it probably doesn't work. And so let's find something more effective. And so that invitation of resistance is hard because you're really saying, hey, come be critical of the work that I'm doing. But I think it makes the overall performance that much better.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we've got, in the midst of that crucible moment or experience, you've got some compassion, you've got some listening, you've got given them enough space. I mean, we talk about let's be innovative, but don't do anything different and take any risks. You're like, which one did you want, right? Like, it's got to come from all that appropriate blend. And again, managing the boundaries, the non-lethal, the non-permanent things. So that kind of gets them over the hump. Now let's talk about the back end of this experience. And, some leaders, come out of that inherently just, anti-fragile, right? It makes them stronger. They're like, okay, hey, I've learned, I've got it, I'm ready for the next one. And then other leaders are just like, that sucked. I don't want to do that again. And you know what? I'm going to play a little smaller and a little safer, and then it starts dimming that light. And then you start getting that cynicism and that jadedness. And, to me, that is a fate far worse than a mistake. Right? Because you permanently take an important, valuable chess player off the board, right? So what does that rebuilding and restoration look like for you? Maybe have you had moments where somebody helped rebuild you? And do you have an example maybe where you've or somebody else has helped others that are in that state?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with that constructive conversation. I learned so much about a leader through trials and tribulation, or, what we kind of refer to as turbulence. When somebody comes and he says, hey, listen, I'm going through this turbulent situation, and we know that, yes, compassion is our first reaction. We're going to help you through this. We're going to grow through this, and we're going to make it better. That being said, what have you learned about yourself through this? What could we have done better? What could you have done better? And you do have those leaders by title that will say things such as, I just don't know if I like being in the arena. I don't know if I like this turbulence. In education especially, but I think everywhere, I think we have a responsibility. I think we have an imperative to our community to always forward think and always take chances and always, think of things differently. If we're always doing the same things the same way, that's what education looked like. I like to look at the classroom in 1900 and the classroom in 2000. I'm going to tell you, it was desks and rows and a teacher at a board. It didn't change much. 2020 hit, and there were some crazy things that happened, and our classroom is much different. The way we offer education experiences to our community is much different. All of those things have helped us grow, and we need leaders that are willing to step into that. When I go meet with the second grade class, if you and I went today and I went in to meet with second grade class and I said, hey, just show of hands, how many people are in here? that are leaders. I'm going to tell you, every second grader in there raise their hand. They're like, yeah, we're in, we're all leaders. It's this great thing. And we all want to do that. But we also have to know that, when you're a leader, there's also this yoke of responsibility that goes around your neck. And that responsibility is to our kids. That responsibility is to our community members. That responsibility is to our legislature, who gives us some funds to make it work. We have a great responsibility, and that can be heavy at times. But that means that with that responsibility, means you have to take so you have to look at things strategically, and you have to move forward. And if that's not you, it's okay. We have some great teachers in our district across the United States that probably are not great administrators or not great leaders. That's okay. We also have great teacher leaders that say, I want to stay in the classroom, and they're amazing leaders for us. And I get to interact with them all the time. And so just because
and their realm of leadership might be different. I mean, I know one of the things you're a big advocate for is, when leaders or when teachers are truly leaders of their classrooms. It's like, hey, this is my squad, this is my realm, and I'm a shining light, and I'm modeling the way, and I'm unleashing them, and that's my contribution. And you know what, man, that is just, I mean, there's nothing more precious than that. So I think to your point, like, where that leadership is and what it looks like. And even then, for some folks, they're like, you know what? People is just not my jam. And it's like, okay, we need followers too. We need people who are saying, hey, what can we do? And I'll go take that hill. I'll go, grind that piece out. Hey, I'll deliver that product that needs to be delivered. Those are all valuable contributions. So, I mean, I think leadership is an important part of society, but it ain't the only part of society.
No question. And for whatever reason, when we hear that word follower, we go, oh gosh, you don't want to be that person. I'm going to tell you, I have yet to meet a great leader that does not have any followers. And so you are dependent on those people. You're dependent on those people to step in. And, we love to think about leadership across our district, across any organization. It's not a title. And as soon as it becomes a title, we're in trouble. Leadership is, we have custodial leaders. We have secretarial leaders. We have, front office staff leaders. We have leaders in every single position. And to me, really, leadership is that action. Hey, I'm willing to put myself out there. I'm willing to be a risk taker. I'm willing to go up to the superintendent and say, hey, this is a process that doesn't work right now. Those are great moments. And, I love it when people come up to me and say things like that, because I know that probably took some courage to say, hey, your idea that you came up with 6 months ago, it's not a very good idea.
Not panning out in this area. Yeah,
absolutely. So I think that to go back to your question, I think that 1.0 is love and compassion. 2.0 is, what did you learn about yourself, and how do we avoid this in the future? How what could we have done to avoid to avoid being where we're at today? And then I think that 3.0 piece is again an analysis by me to say, hey, how does that leader react from that? Does that leader turn around and say, oh, you know what? I'm better from it. I've learned from it. This is like being sore, after leaving the weight room. I feel good about myself. I'm getting stronger. Or does that leader say, man, I just don't know if this is for me? Because that's where we start to differentiate who's going to make us organizationally strong, who's going to bring us forward, and who's probably better off, in a different role where they may be more of a workhorse in an area that they're not leading. And there's value on both sides.
Well, and I think the other reality is leadership does have a half-life. I mean, I kind of characterize it that way, because you are radiating, right? I mean, you're radiating, you're producing energy, you're generating energy, you're inviting energy, and that does take a toll over time. And so I find that, and it may not, and again, it's not by age necessarily, but it might be by role, right? Where, somebody's been in a certain role, and you reach a certain time where it's just like, maybe it's a time for you to have a fresh arena to play in. And maybe it's time for somebody else who should be fresh in this arena. And that's natural succession. And that's why the word success is in there, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And I think being able to help differentiate, I know I found myself in those modes where I stayed a little too long in a role, and that beat down and the compilation of post-traumatic stress started to get to a point where it's like, yeah, I'm not showing up the same way I used to and I need to. And it's time for me to make a change. And I think that's healthy. That's not a failure. That doesn't mean you're done. You can go on to a whole other wonderful other career, or like you made a change, or maybe it's just a different role in the same organization. But I think being able to have those kind of conversations as well, to say, hey, do you still have a half-life in this area, or is it time for a shift? That's just playing to people's strengths. And I think that's also being respectful, right? Nobody wants to stay locked in a position that is not fun, not producing the results, and they're just getting drugged through the mud, right? That's not good to anybody.
Find your passion. And if your passion burns out, if your candle burns out, you have to find something else. I made a commitment to my wife a long time ago. I love education. I love what I do. It is my passion. I wake up every single day, and I'm very, very ecstatic that I get to be in a role that I'm in. That being said, the day I wake up, and no matter what, the day I wake up and say, this is not my gig, is the day I'm going to go find something else to do. And that for some people, that would be a very scary life. For my wife, she's like, hey, you know what? I get it. You'll find some other, and you have to find people that are confident in themselves enough to be able to say, it's going to be okay. But the worst person, and I've seen this in the private sector. I meet with CEOs across the state of Idaho. And when I ask people, hey, how are things going in your, well, it's just not good. I've got a tough board. And part of the reason that things are tough is because your passion right there. And maybe it is an opportunity for you to reflect a little bit and say, hey, is this my gig anymore? And sometimes it's not. And those are tough answers, especially when it's the only thing you've known, or it's your defining moment. But hopefully we could all look back at those instances and those circumstances and say, hey, something else is going to light my fire, and something else is ignite me and help me find a new passion. And I'm going to be better for this at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's sad and it's terrible when somebody quits and stays, right?
Yes.
And oftentimes, like you said, it's because, they're scared, they don't know what else out there, but they also will just laminate their identity to the position. And we're like, look, leadership is not a title. Your identity is not a position. I know with some of the leadership programs we've done here in Boise, the whole first day of those leadership programs, nobody's allowed to talk about their positions or their occupation. It's like, who are you as a human being and as a person? You were one before that job. You will be one after that job. That's our identity, right? And that can be reinvented lots of ways. I know for you, right? You went from a private sector, potential criminal justice, into education. I know for me, we've hired some phenomenal teachers that have bridged over into consulting, who were stellar, and they had no idea this existed, and now they're rocking it. And yes, Nicole, I'm talking about you. But you get to reinvent yourself. And isn't that liberating, and exciting too? But yeah, knowing when that's the proper time to make that change. Well, Derek, this has been a great kind of life cycle perspective on, as you're going in, how to not be surprised by the surprises, know where they're going to come from, and how to listen through them, what to do to support folks when they're in it. And then, how to help evaluate how we're going to get the best out of that crucible experience we just went through, and where do we go from here, right? Do we strengthen up in this arena, or do we maybe look at, playing in a different one? So what are some other things anywhere in that space where you were really that has helped you, or you've seen made a difference that you wanted to share that haven't had a chance to highlight yet?
Yeah. I think that I would say this, as we look at the whole situation, it's not just the person that's in the arena that grows from that. I grow as a leader as well. As I'm coaching people, as I'm working through things with people, I also grow from that, because it takes a lot for me. I'm going to tell you, growth for me is not stepping in and saying, hey, let's just do it this way. So I think there are
no other leaders can relate to that at all.
Yeah,
right. I think you're the only helicopter parent and the only helicopter administrator in the country. So
I am the only one, and I'll learn out of that. But it's one of those things where these situations are a moment for everybody, and oftentimes we think, okay, it's just that person that's going through it that is that is growing. But the best growing experiences are through those failures and through those struggles. Listen, if we were all successful at everything we did, we wouldn't be learning. And it's hard to have that perspective when you're in the middle of the fire, if you will. But knowing that at one point you're going to learn something from that, and even taking time to be really intentional about looking back and saying, hey, what are the things that got me here today? It wasn't, hey, you know what, I was really great at this, and so you were great at that.
And this came easy, and odds were forever in my favor. You're like, no,
absolutely,
yeah. Well, the setbacks, are the stepping stones to success, and I think what's brilliant about the transformation you're striving to achieve in the West Ada district is, how do we stop trying to push away some of those challenges that that happen for those students, and really embrace that as part of the learning journey. So because otherwise we're just doing them a disservice. So I think that's, and then seeing that teachers are, leaders of their classrooms, and that they're the ones that are modeling as much as any content and curriculum is, and really empowering them to just be great at what they do. I love what you're up to and what you're striving to do. And I'm grateful to live in this valley, be able to hire future employees from your district.
No more. In fact, I think we're hiring Nicole back. I didn't tell you that yet.
Right. Okay. Well, you can match the offer, buddy. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, details. We'll get into that later.
Absolutely. Derek, there's a question we like to ask all of our guests. And this is a question that came from my buddy, Darren. So Darren, thank you again for that suggestion. I'm listening as Derek here is telling us to do. But what would you say is one hallmark of an unleashed leader? Kind of how would you distill that down? I mean, there's many dimensions, I'm sure, but what's one hallmark that you would say, hey, I see it and I know it and I feel it when...
Yeah.
When
somebody's able to be reflective, and you feel like that's such a quality, I think if I interviewed anybody for a leadership position, everybody would say I'm reflective. It's a great cliche term or a great buzzword that you can use in an interview. I'm really reflective, but really seeing that happen and say, okay, it's not easy when things are coming at you and, you're trying to go down this road and there's so many distractions, so many challenges in your way. It's not easy to just pause and say, okay, what can I learn from this? And how is this going to make me better? I'm not going to tell you that I'm perfect at that every moment, but I think we try to take some really intentional time to do after action on any big situation to say, what can we all learn from this, from communications to academics to operations? What can we all learn from this? How do we get better? And I think that helps to build trust, not only with the people that you get to work with every single day, but with the stakeholders that you get to serve. All of those pieces are really important. So that being a good reflective leader is easier said than done, but I think is one of those things that makes great leaders set themselves apart.
That's a beautiful bookend. I know both you and I have what I call the human in the arena quote up there. We've kind of referred to that a lot here. I know that's a big Brene Brown quote as well too. And now you're talking about the human in the mirror, right? The Michael Jackson song. So if you've got if you're in the arena and you got a mirror to be reflective, not in a vain way, but to be like, what did I just do weird there?
Absolutely.
That gives you kind of that, the opportunity to learn and the actual reflection to accrue that learning. That creates a pretty powerful engine of growth. Well, Derek, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I've been looking forward to this since we got to meet. Love your energy. Again, love your service to our community. Where can folks find out more about you? I know there's the West Ada podcast. Where is the best place to find you on social media?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I am on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with anybody. I love to seeing the great things that are going on out there. A student of leadership. So I'd love to connect with anybody out there. I try to make myself as available as possible. Also through our website or through, we do have a podcast that's available through the website where we try to connect and try to sell our story a little bit, let people know the great things going on in public education here in just little old Idaho.
Yeah, a lot of innovation. Like I said, largest in the state and probably in a good couple 100 miles in every direction with all of our surrounding states to that matter. So
you got it.
Yeah, definitely pioneering and learning and being okay with that, right? And not trying to be perfect, but saying, hey, we can't settle. for the agrarian age status quo of education. Like, dear Lord. Well, thank you again for being on the show, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, good sir.
Hey, you do the same. Thanks so much, Lee. Appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us today on the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss a moment that could be the key to your next breakthrough. Let's stay connected and contribute together by grabbing that @Unleashing Leaders handle on LinkedIn, YouTube, or your favorite network. This is Lee Scott. Keep learning, loving, and leading. Our future and our communities are counting on us.